Schumer and any members he pulls with him are going to face massive backlash from progressive Twitter. It's not just progressive Twitter, bro. It's moderate Democrats. Maybe Democrats aren't these like amazing chess players. Maybe we're kind of in the shitter right now because Democrats are actually bad at strategy. You were betting that a Republican House under a cult leader like Trump was going to be unable to wrangle on his first major budget a majority? You were banking on that? Then your guy is shit for brains. Someone please get this guy a lifetime supply of copium. Connect it to the copium vats that exist in Copitopia. 1 trillion cc's of cope continuously pumped into his lungs. Hey folks, please like, comment, and subscribe. And make sure to check out my newsletter. Information is in the description. What's my response to Schumer's actual reasoning that shutdown would enable Trump to gut everything? I do have a response to that, which is no. And also, to the extent that it would, he's already doing it. And I don't believe that the value add of, any uncertain additional gutting that he's already cutting half of the Department of Education, right? He's already cutting the CFPB. He's already firing like half the IRS workers. Firing. That's what's already happening. Now, the big danger of this bill, in addition to all the other reasons that I have, is actually the slush fund aspect of it. That's one of the big things that's problematic about this bill, is with the lack of specificity and directed appropriations and legislative protections, you're actually giving him more power. How are you giving him more power? How can I say that? Well, you're funding agencies that he's defunding and giving him money. All right? Imagine what Trump is going to do with actual money. That's one limitation on his power, has been his lack of money. And now you're proposing to just give a bunch of money where he's already going to use executive power to take money from one place, move it to somewhere else. And not only that, you're giving it the congressional sign of approval to weaken the case in court. So it's a bad move. So on the one hand, right, there's a limit to what Trump can do because he doesn't have money. But if you're proposing to give him money with very few, if any, conditions, just give me a second, folks, or guarantees, he can actually do more bad stuff. For example, one thing that the bill actually does, explicitly, not just in this kind of shady moving money around thing, one thing it actually does is fund more deportations. Deportations that we now know are going to be targeted based on First Amendment criteria. So you're already literally empowering that maneuver. And in addition, you are sending large amounts of money to an executive branch that he's dominating. And so that gives him a lot more flexibility, and it gives him stronger arguments in court. Why would we do that? That's a big reason. Number two, on the tariff stuff, right? It's extending his tariff powers and pushing off potentially uncomfortable votes for this Congress to undo these tariffs. So it's relieving pressure on the tariff front. It's relieving pressure and enabling Trump's worst fiscal impulses. It's encouraging the Republicans to continue pressing on Democrats because they know they're weak and gutless, right? The same reasons that Trump is having lack of success internationally is because no one believes his threats and they're standing up to him. The opposite signal is sent if we just allow Republicans to push through whatever they want and the Democrats vote for it. Come on, guys. That's encouraging. That's saying that we don't have the stomach to stand by, not doing anything to protect workers who are being targeted in the Social Security Administration and other needed sectors. You want to know what a reasonable compromise is? Hey, if we appropriate money to a particular place, let's make sure that you spend it there. How is that unreasonable? How is it unreasonable for Congress to be like, hey, if we're going to appropriate this, we need to have assurances you're actually going to spend it where we tell you to. How is that crazy? A second part of this is, if it was a good enough rationale to stop the bill in the House, there's a good enough rationale to stop the bill in the Senate. The same dynamic was at play in the House. The only difference here is filibuster versus no votes, right? If it were the case that the House they were short 2 votes, let's say, imagine, to pass it with pure partisan lines, would you say, well, we might as well vote for it because if it can't get out of the House and it has to start in the House, then golly gee, we'll just have a shutdown. It's the exact same dynamic. The only difference is optics. So I don't want to hear this about it's a fundamental, it's the nature of the shutdown that's at the risk. The difference in what makes the Democrats comfortable in having the House do it and not the Senate do it is the senators themselves feel more threatened and the optics of it. But it's not the nature of the shutdown. Otherwise, the Democrats wouldn't have all voted in the House unanimously. Tells you something, by the way, that the Democratic House is completely, seemingly surprised by the about face from Chuck Schumer. Tells me that they're not communicating. Comment from Falls. It feels like Schumer's operating framework is making sure Democrats aren't blamed for stuff, facilitating judicial nominations, but he's clearly uncomfortable in the offensive position. This moment calls for a knuckle dragger. Yeah, it does. And it's important for us to realize what this is. It is a fight not just for policies and not just to protect the American people, but it's a fight against time. We need to fight the clock, run the clock out on this administration before he's able to do fucked up stuff to our Constitution and our way of life. Trump is a direct threat to the American way. The longer we postpone his worst impulses, the better. So it's a fight for time. And we need to be on offense all the time. We need killers. We need killers all the time. And we need to be a little bit of a nuisance, a little bit of a prick, as my rugby coach used to say. So I don't want to hear it from the people saying, what if not? There's risks on both sides for sure. But here's the consistent through line that you should be judging yourself by. That has been the case with all of these near shutdown situations. The Democrats until now have held the following line. If you want Democratic votes, you negotiate with us. That was true of the McCarthy situation. You said, hey, we'll save you, McCarthy, but you got to negotiate with us. That was true of 2 or 3 other near misses during Biden's term with the House of Representatives under Republican control. Our line was consistently, if you want Democratic votes, you need to negotiate. That's very simple. That's a very easy to understand story that needs to be told to the American people. Instead of chasing the American people, instead of living in fear, why don't you have some balls and make a narrative of your own? At the end of the day, they're in control of the government, and it's their fucking fault. It actually is their fault. If they want Democratic votes, they have to expect to negotiate with Democrats. Same thing, by the way, when we need Republican votes. What do? We get a deal. We get a deal done. That's what Democrats do. That's what Republicans do under normal times. That's what they should do. The exceptions being the budget reconciliation process and back in Obama's term when he had for 1 month a supermajority. But the consistent line until now, it appears, was if you want Democratic votes, you give concessions. You negotiate. That was the deal. This is a cut against that norm, and it's happening at the most possibly inopportune time, where Elon Musk and Donald Trump are unconstitutionally seizing power for themselves, usurping the legislative branch, and they want Democrats to co-sign that. The Democrats are, we're supposed to be the ones telling the American people, hey, the sky is falling, because guess what? It is. The sky's falling. And we're going to co-sign it? No way. No way. And the stuff that he does in the cover of a shutdown, you can say there are some unknowns there for sure. In fact, I've raised before the specter of a shutdown. But I know now Trump doesn't want a shutdown. He pressured Massey. I don't think that they have it in them to do a kind of 5D chess game like that. And by the way, even if they did want to shut down, they could get it. They could get a shutdown if they wanted to. It's in their power. The polling is right now showing that if a shutdown would occur, they would blame Trump and the Republicans. That's the only polling we have that I've seen. At a time when Republicans are running scared from their own town halls, we can't have a coordinated media campaign. What really f***ed us over in the optics game was Chuck Schumer not having a united front, not getting the Dems in line. Hakeem Jeffries, for all his faults, he brought his members to heel, save for one. That's where we're the step back, is that we did not show unity and strength immediately. And that's a failure of Senate leadership. And so now we kind of have a shit show. But you know what? I almost would rather have this now. If there's going to be a reckoning for leadership, it should happen now. And Democrats are right to be pissed. You should be angry. So let's hear what Chuck Schumer has to say. Chucky.
The United States has confronted a very bitter truth. The federal government has been taken over by a nihilist. Donald Trump, in 2 months, has taken a blowtorch to our country and wielded chaos like a weapon. Republicans in Congress, meanwhile, have caved to his every whim. The grand old party has devolved into a crowd of Trump sycophants and MAGA radicals who want to burn everything to the ground. Look no further than what Doge is doing. Now Republicans' nihilism has brought us to the brink of disaster. Unless Congress acts, the federal government will shut down tomorrow at midnight. I have said many times there are no winners in a government shutdown, but there are certainly victims.
This is Trump. Congratulations to Chuck Schumer for doing the right thing. Took guts and courage. The big tax cuts, LA fire fix, debt ceiling bill, and so much more is coming. We should all. I saw the Yglesias take. Yeah, I'll take it on 100%. And so much more is coming. We should all work together on that very dangerous situation. A non-pass would be a country destroyer. Approval will lead us to new heights. Again, really good and smart move by Senator Schumer. This could lead to something big for the USA, a whole new direction and beginning. F that guy. Why would you ever give him the opportunity to spend money however he wants? All right, let's look at the Yglesias take. You guys are chewing my ear off about it. Point number one. Chuck Schumer signaled Thursday night that over the objections, a majority of his caucus. Spell check, bro. He and a critical mass of Senate Democrats will allow cloture to be invoked on a CR. Okay. Yes, that happened. 2, this is a bitter pill for most Democrats. Schumer and any members he pulls with him are going to face massive backlash from progressive Twitter and from major party donors and activist group leaders, all of whom were itching for a fight. It's not just progressive Twitter, bro. It's moderate Democrats coming out in favor of it. You have the most vulnerable Senate Democrats, Ruben Gallego, Mark Kelly, Raphael Warnock. And so even just the framing of that already dumb, as though the rank and file Democrat is not included here, right? So this framing is already wrong. The rank and file, the Democrats are not happy with leadership. It is not a progressive Twitter issue, although it also includes that. It's a rank and file issue. Every single House Democrat, save for one, voted against the bill. They did so, many of them in vulnerable districts. So no, not just backlash from the progressive Twitter, from party donors and activists, from members, from constituents who all are itching to stop. Not just a fight, right? A fight for a fight's sake isn't what we're looking for. No, this is about protecting the Constitution. This is about protecting the American people, not just a fight for fight's sake, which is what Yglesias is intimating. Schumer has, in fact, done the right thing here. In particular, he's doing what a leader ought to do and carrying the weight for something that is unpopular with the base, but that is the correct decision for his members. If it's the correct decision for his members, why are his members in revolt? Unless you think it's all a 5D strategy among the moderate members. unless you think this is all theater. If you think it's all theater when they're hearing Kirsten Gillibrand shout from inside the room, contrary to internal reporting, leaks, and that kind of thing, that people are genuinely upset. I've been talking about appropriation strategy with my politics podcast mate. Who cares? Who cares about Brian? I don't care about Brian. Brian always wants to fight harder. Who's Brian? I don't care about Brian. But at least with this started, he was saying that what he wanted was for House Democrats to be unanimously opposed to an appropriations deal that didn't check DOJ. He acknowledged on the show that it wouldn't be viable for a Senate minority to filibuster CR that had already passed the House. Why? That is begging the question. That is circular, right? You're trying to prove why it's not viable to oppose the bill in the Senate. And you're saying, I know this guy Brian, and he's a real fighter. And he acknowledged as a fighter that it wouldn't be viable for a Senate minority to filibuster CR that's already passed the House. What you're saying is optically it wouldn't. Why? What's your intuition there? Show that. It's the same optics, in my opinion. Maybe it's different to the American people. Time will tell. Maybe it's different when we have this public spat. You can't seriously argue to me that Schumer did everything right if there's a revolt in the House, if people are upset in the House. At least you have to admit there was a complete breakdown in communications, right? When you have expectations set, and if people are misinterpreting the cute little statements you made the day before where he's like, Democrats stand united against this bill. And then you're like, oh, I meant against the bill. I didn't mean against cloture. When you do those kind of cute tricks and you spurn expectations, maybe you're not doing everything perfectly. Maybe it's not this grand strategy when maybe Democrats aren't these like amazing chess players. You know, maybe we're kind of in the shitter right now because Democrats are actually bad at strategy. Maybe we're in the shitter right now because Democrats actually suck at media and their intuitions are awful. Maybe the guy who said we're so aroused, maybe he doesn't have the best pulse on what the American people want to see out of Democrats. Just a thought. And at the bare minimum, the comms have been abysmal. Comms within the party, comms to the base. If this was the right strategy the whole time, it should have been completely different how they communicated internally. I mean, look at this. He said what he was banking on, this I'm guessing he means Brian was banking on, was the fact that it's been 1,000,000 years since House Republicans have been able to pass a CR on a party line vote. It's Trump's America. How many of these like little votes has Johnson won? Because Trump is able to pull them in line. He has some wiggle room with his members. You were betting that a Republican House under a cult leader like Trump was going to be unable to wrangle on his first major budget a majority? That's what you thought? You were banking on that? Then your guy is shit for brains. Useless analysis. And all of these like little close votes, whether it's the speakership itself, right? Everyone was like, oh, is Johnson going to get the speakership? Is Johnson going to get the speakership? He got it. And it was done in one vote. It delayed a little bit, but there was one vote. And then recently, a couple of these, it'd been early nights. Johnson has been getting wins. You expected them not to vote for a CR when Trump's in office, pushing on all their buttons? That was so you were totally fine with the House strategy because you had the expectation that the cult-like Republican Party that's totally enthralled to Donald Trump would oppose him. That makes sense. He thought a hard line from Hakeem Jeffries would bring the GOP to the table. I agreed with that strategy. Jeffries implemented that strategy. His caucus went along with it, and it didn't work. How many times do Democrats need to learn this lesson, old man, that relying on Republicans to do anything that you want them to do is never a good strategy? Whether that's relying on Susan Collins or Lisa Murkowski not to vote for abysmal nominees in the Senate, or whether that's relying on them to not be in cultish devotion to the cult master Donald Trump. Why are we trying to ground our strategy always in what the opposition is going to do. Have some affirmative gravitas yourself. Set the stakes yourself. Don't constantly be chasing the other side. Say, hey, no negotiation, no votes. And we're serious. Imagine if that had been the line from the start with clear leadership on both sides, Senate, House. You will not get a single vote from Democrats in the House or the Senate if there is not negotiations, good faith negotiations. Otherwise, you're on your own. Instead, we have this weasel shit. Oh, we don't know. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. Maybe, 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Have a plan. Stick with it. Have some leadership. Have some guts. In fact, the strategy backfired. The strategy of relying on House Republicans not to be complete sycophants to Donald Trump and giving him everything he wants. That strategy backfired. Because in order to get a party line bill through the House, the CR wound up being a not quite clean CR that shifts public policy to the right somehow and also contains an odious rider impacting Washington, D.C. When you say the strategy backfired, you're like saying, oh, okay, so the Democrats did something wrong. The Republicans were not willing to negotiate. Where do we get, so like the back, we didn't like lose anything more by sticking to the strategy of not working with people who didn't want to work with us. What's the other strategy? Giving them everything they want all the time, surrendering? What the fuck? When someone says backfire, it's like, okay, like imagine you guys ever do that, like that shot, in beer pong, right? You get rebuttal shots. Or when you do the $1 million shot at the basketball game, whatever you're talking about, does it backfire when you miss? When you have when the only shot you had was that shot, right? And you didn't lose anything by taking that shot. Like, what did we lose? What's the backfire? They weren't willing to negotiate. And so we had a hard line because they weren't going to negotiate with us. Because they had poison pills like give Donald Trump all the power to do whatever he wants. They had some poison pills like over DC. I just don't understand, like, what's the narrative that you're stringing along, that this is just like, who could have predicted it? Just, I don't even understand where you're getting this out of, other than the deepest recess of your anal cavity. Once the House play failed, the Menchie correct thing for Jeffries to do would have been to say he thought it was a good strategy, but it didn't work, and now it's time for Senate Democrats to admit they don't have the cards in fold. So what Yglesias is telling you is the correct strategy would be for Hakeem Jeffries to get out on the podium and say, that was a humongous failure and we should just give up now in the Senate. Even though the dynamic is completely the same, other than they need the votes in the Senate as opposed to needing the votes in the House. The smart thing for Hakeem Jeffries to do, what he should have done was, tell all his members, which inevitably would have leaked to the press by one of these ambitious Democrats. Yeah, I f***ed up. I relied on them not being slavish to Trump. That was the correct play. To say he thought it was a good strategy. I thought it would have worked, but now we should just give up in the Senate. Everyone should vote for the bill. That's the correct strategy? What's the argument for that? By the way, I can't believe people were linking me this article. This article's dog shit. Not you, though, whoever linked it. All the other people. Instead, backbench House Democrats largely spent the past few days posturing and calling for Senate Dems to filibuster the bill based and force the government into a shutdown. Force the Republicans to the negotiating table. From a narrower standpoint of self-interest, this made sense. To the extent that it's not a grander strategy, that's to the leadership's fault. You get me, right? If this is a problem, if what you're doing is you're blaming backbenchers, who's at fault? The leadership. Schumer himself. Jeffries himself. If what you're saying is this was stupid, and this was all kind of a collective action problem, prisoner's dilemma, that still reflects poorly on leadership. Even if you buy this narrative, which I buy the narrative that everyone is not talking to each other, and the Democrats are disorganized as because that goes along with my priors, which is they've looked disorganized as that goes with my priors. I'm listening to all these reports of Democrats being pissed at each other because the communication sucks, because the leadership does not have the confidence of the members, and because they do not have the confidence of the electorate. That's a failure of leadership. The odds were good that Schumer would cave and House Democrats could have it both ways. Playing the hero to the base who got stabbed in the back by Schumer without dealing with the consequences of a shutdown. So what you want is actually, or I don't even know if you're saying this is like a good idea from the House Democrats' perspective, or you're saying internally from the House Democrats' perspective, you think it makes sense for House Democrats to be painting our Senate leadership. You think it makes in their internal sense, or like for their internal self-interest, it makes sense for Chuck Schumer to be painted as a villain. Just realize how depressing, if true, that calculation is. That the optimal self-interested strategy for House Democrat backbenchers is to have Chuck Schumer painted to be a MAGA apologist collaborator. That's the most self-interested thing that these House Dems could be doing, is stabbing Schumer in the back or being stabbed in the back by Schumer and having that be the optics. That's your take? That can't be the most optimal self-interested strategy for the Democrat House backbenchers. For who? By the way, the base and the rank and file are with the House Democrats. It should tell you something like, everyone, in my opinion, who matters in terms of the constituent groups of the Democratic Party are angry with leadership. What you're saying is it would make sense for these subgroups within the Democratic caucus to reinforce the base's like historic anger at leadership. What the fuck? How about we get good leadership that people are proud of? How about we have good leadership that people don't have to invent these stories of 5D chess to explain? This is too cute. This is Sorkin-esque. God damn. Why can't it just be us working together and being strong? Shutting the government down to halt Doge did not make sense on a number of levels. Even putting it down, it just shows you don't get it. You just don't get it. Doge is one aspect of the administration's policy here. It's beyond Doge as well. It's every other part of Trump's government as well. It's not just the cuts, it's what he wants to actively do. And so even saying that this is to halt Doge, you don't even know what the argument is. The argument is you can't halt Doge in that way. That Trump is, the way to halt Doge eventually is going to be in the courts, hopefully. But what your Democrats are saying is he's going to be doing this shit no matter what. He's going to be trying to fire people no matter what. Shutdown or no shutdown. What we're trying to do is limit his access to power. Limit legitimizing his arguments in court. Limit his access to actual funds. If the problem with Doge is they are laying off workers and curtailing programs that are vital and important, a shutdown also does those things. A shutdown does not lay off workers. So that's not true. How does a shutdown lay off workers? If by curtail programs you mean possibly stop or pause programs, it would do those things. But they're already pausing programs. They're already f***ing with the programs. It's overdetermined. Shutdown or no shutdown, they're trying to stop all federal financial assistance. They're trying to close the Department of Education. The shutdown might actually save some workers. Furlough them. Under the circumstances of an appropriations lapse, Trump and Musk can just furlough 100% of the federal workers they would like to lay off and declare whoever they don't want to lay off essential, and they've already achieved their endgame. Bro, where have you been? Where have you been? What do you think these fights have been in the last 6-7 weeks? They've been doing that. They've been trying to fire everybody. Again, overdetermined. And it wouldn't give them the authority to lay off everyone any more than they have that authority now. Certainly, it could give them authority to furlough people, but they wouldn't have that good of a chance, in my opinion, of protections in the court if the Congress didn't try to put in some measures to protect them. And so to the extent that there's any possibility of protecting these workers, it's got to come through Congress. Maybe we'll get lucky in the courts. Maybe. Because the federal workers at the epicenter of the pushback against Doge would all be either furloughed or else working without pay, pressure to cave Trump would soon be coming from the very people Democrats are trying to help. Against whom? Against the people that have already been attacking them for the last 6-7 weeks? Or against the party that's trying to make sure that they're protected through a negotiation? Who is the enemy number one going to be? Chuck Schumer or Elon Musk? Do you trust your messaging or not? Do you trust the truth or not? This is an argument from the position of weakness. This is dog shit. Yes, there would be pressure from federal workers. Yes, there would be pressure from individuals, American citizens. And it would lie at the feet of the people responsible for the shutdown, the Republicans. Senior Trump officials have signaled repeatedly that they want to challenge the constitutionality of the Impoundment Control Act. Bro, they're already doing that. They're already in court challenging the Impoundment Control Act. If the Supreme Court sides with them about that, then no additional legislation would change anything. That's not true either. This guy has no clue. Oh my God, I can't believe people are looking at this. So if the Supreme Court rejects Trump's argument and says that the Impoundment Control Act is unconstitutional, one, that it could mean that the president can't impound any funds, or it could be a more limited ruling, or it could say that the president can do anything he wants. Yeah, in that sense. But if that's the case, then you understand, if that's the case, and Trump and the Congress already allocate all those funds already, that means Trump can stop any funds he wants no matter what, but you've just given him all those funds. That's the key point. That where's the analysis of that? You're giving him a slush fund. If the Supreme Court rules that the Impoundment Control Act is unconstitutional, then that means he constitutionally can impound all the funds that you've just created a slush fund for. So what's the absent criteria that would make things worse? Or what's the criteria that would make things worse if the Supreme Court rules like that? Maybe the fact that Trump has just been allocated a slush fund and given essentially discretion to spend it however he wants by the Supreme Court. And at that point, the only thing that Congress has up its sleeve is literally cutting off the spigot, all or nothing, and saying, hey, we'll stop all fund. Like at that point, it's just a battle of the branches. And wow, you're a real idiot for passing any appropriation legislation if the Supreme Court goes that way. That doesn't help your case at all, Yglesias. A particularly upsetting aspect of all this is that Republicans inserted a poison pill in the House bill ordering DC government to cut its spending of our own local tax dollars by about $1 billion. Yeah, another great reason not to vote for this thing. I have been trying to read up and report on this, and no one is clear on why House Republicans did this or how it's supposed to work. Bro, it's so obvious why they did this. They want to over the one, they want to get savings, right? And say that they got savings, and they don't care about DC because DC all votes Democrats, and there's no senators associated with the DC people. So they don't care about DC. DC's all Democrats, and so they don't care about imposing pain and getting $1 billion that they can spend on deportations, half of which is going to be spent on deportations. You don't need a fucking textbook to find out why Republicans want to fuck over DC. They've been wanting to fuck over DC for the entirety of DC's political existence. I'm now roughly 70% sure that they put it in just to create a hothouse environment among Democratic Party staffers and bait the Senate into a shutdown. You're overthinking it, bro. You're 70% sure of this? Maybe they're just like, I don't give a about DC. You think this is all some grand conspiracy to bait a shutdown? That's also, if that's the strategy, you don't have any idea how that'll turn out. It's a risky strategy. Regardless of the reason, this is now set to become law with chaotic implications on our local police departments and our public schools, including the one my son attends. I'm worried about this personally. Collins says this is bad. Yeah, okay. And my sincere hope is that she will move a separate piece of legislation lifting it. Oh, there you go. There Yglesias goes, hoping for Republicans, right? I'm hoping that Susan Collins moves legislation lifting it. That'll pass the House Republican controlled. Like, what are you talking about? If this thing passes, you're f***ed. I assume there are GOP staffers who live in the city as well and don't want to see cops and teachers chaotically laid off in the middle of the year. Maybe, I really hope so. Someone please get this guy a lifetime supply of copium, connect it to the copium vats that exist in Copitopia, and have nonstop 1 trillion cc's of cope. continuously pumped into his lungs. Holy You're assuming that GOP staffers who live in the city give enough of a to save this? Who believes this garbage? I really want to emphasize that even if you disagree with me about this, if your reaction to these events is to get mad at Chuck Schumer, you are getting played. No, we're not getting played, bro. I hate this Redditor type analysis. Sometimes a duck is just a duck. You don't have to overthink it. You can be mad at Chuck Schumer. You should be mad at Chuck Schumer. Even on the best case, even assuming, thank you for this up, guys. Even assuming the best case for Chuck, which is this is the right strategy, he royally f***ed the execution. So you can be pissed at Chuck Schumer for the execution. If nothing else, why wouldn't we be mad? It reflects so poorly on Democrats. The execution, if nothing else. Lots of people are engaging in cheap position taking in favor of no vote on cloture, but neither House Democrats nor the people voting no in the Senate nor the people getting mad on Twitter have an actual strategy for getting what the base wants out of this, which is some kind of act of Congress saying that Trump and Musk need to conduct the government differently. What we want are incredibly simple demands. Incredibly simple. Number one, any negotiation with Democrats that would show a willingness to have some kind of compromise to establish a precedent that you can't take our votes for granted on MAGA bills. That's one, is any negotiation. Two, part of the legislation protecting the jobs of people who work at the Social Security Administration. That's concrete. That doesn't equal what you're saying is, legislation that says Trump and Musk need to conduct the government differently. Some more specified direction. Really what we're looking for is a 30-day CR so there can be negotiations for an actual omnibus. That's something you can achieve without saying Trump and Musk need to conduct the government differently. Get negotiations for an omnibus. Buy yourself 30 days on an actual clean CR. Even just an actually clean CR without the cuts on the earmarks, without cuts on the some of the housing stuff, cuts on some of the nutritional benefits, right? Even that would be an improvement. You can't be it has to be a law that says Trump and Musk no longer can do anything they want. Yglesias, you lack for imagination. There are tons of things that Democrats are saying are wrong with this CR that there could be compromise on. 100% stupid. The fact is, Democrats lost the election. They lost the White House. They lost lost the House. They lost the Senate. Proofread your shit, bro. Loser mentality. Loser mentality. Loser mentality. We lost, so we have to just let them f*** us over and let them f*** the country over even harder. And now a bunch of copium and crying. It drives me crazy that the very same progressives who shit on Democrats for not being able to stop bad things, if there were 4 more House Democrats, we all agree. None of this is an argument. None of this is an argument. If you want to stop Republicans from doing bad things, you need to win races. We all agree. We all agree. So this is not an argument on it. Donate money to good candidates. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, true. We see once again the filibuster is not the boon that moderate senators think it is. Their lives would be much easier if they could just do... Okay, so 14 through 16 are not relevant. So what's the argument actually here? Why are people citing this like a good article? What about this is compelling to you? His rendition of this kind of like 5D chess that he believes is going on behind closed doors, either from the House Democrat backbenchers or the 70% chance that they're baiting Democrats into shutting down by doing this DC government thing, this hopium about Susan Collins, and he's actually saying he's worried about this. So what is the actual argument here? Totally misunderstanding the danger here. It's not about Doge stopping layoffs. The furloughs might actually save people's jobs. But it's also about giving a slush fund that he can use however he wants without necessary direction. It's just crazy. This article sucks. And people are reposting it.